Who is Jason Webley? Chances are, if you've even heard his name before, you only have a vague idea about the answer to this question. Accordion player, musical style somewhere between Tom Waits and Leonard Cohen, long hair, appeared on Welcome to Night Vale a few times. But when you take a closer look, an image emerges of a very unique and thoroughly underground musical career. The folk troubadour act was not Webley's original specialty. As a high school student and throughout college, he played in punk bands with an electric guitar, occasionally sequencing music on his computer, a self-described geeky kid. Jason didn't even touch the accordion until he became part of a college performance of Bertolt Brecht's play The Caucasian Chalk Circle in his senior year of 1996, where he wrote some songs performed on the instrument. The accordion's versatility and busking and unique sound will be major factors in his adoption of the instrument as a signature. Eventually, in the spring of 1998, Webley decided to quit his day job and begin busking on the street with his accordion.
I want music that tears itself apart.
It was about 9 years ago when I first started playing on the street, and I didn't really think that was going to be a career. It was I kind of had this episode where I thought I'd gone crazy, and I kind of quit my job, and I had recorded I recorded hundreds of songs actually, but like the last 10 of them seemed different somehow. And so I put out a little CD to give out to friends, and I made 1,000 copies of it because I had, it was cheap and easy to do that, and I thought, well, I'll just give these away, and it'll be kind of a farewell gesture to this whole era of my life where I was a sane person. And after I gave the CDs away to my friends, I had about 980 CDs left, and playing on the street was like to get rid of those. I sold them for like $1 at first. It was just to try to get rid of this embarrassing tower of CDs. It was just kind of a gradual process. People responded to my music I played on the street. That's actually how I got a fan base, was just playing on the street and then playing at festivals. And then I would start getting emails like, hey, will you come play in this town? And I'd be like, well, I don't have a car and I don't, but eventually I'd started connecting the dots and touring. It's just all kind of grown organically from just, people who have seen me and have responded and have invited me to come do things.
The CD he made of the songs from that year became Viaje, his first album. Webley describes it as not my best album, but it is the rawest and maybe the most honest. The album served as a type of busker chronicle, dealing with the melancholy of a musician on the road. The next December, he released Against the Night. A standout in his discography, the 17-track album would see Webley solidify his artistic identity with Waitsian journeys into dark cabaret and folk punk, which were present in the previous album but not as developed. These two albums would combine in creating Webley's early image as a grungy street bard, howling out songs accompanied by his accordion and a vodka bottle filled with coins. Back in these years, Webley would ritualistically fake his death every Halloween, returning in the spring. The years leading up to his third album were an important time for Webley. Songs from Viaje and Against the Night would become staples in his discography, particularly Last Song, which became his consistent show closer. Webley jokingly stated at one show in 2016 that
pretty much every song I write is just me kind of trying to write this one again and failing.
As he picked up momentum, Webley was able to sign with Springman Records, a punk-focused record label that would release his next two albums as well as re-releasing the previous two. The two albums released under Springman would mark a transition in his musical style and artistic image. Counterpoint, released in 2002, marked a gradient transition between old and new. Some songs resembled Against the Night, albeit less gritty and more polished, while others adopted a cleaner folk style that would characterize his work from then on. This album displayed the full range of Webley's eclectic style. 12 different key signatures, widely varied musical styles, and a full orchestral range of instruments which included a huge carry-on loaned to him by a local church. In 2004, Webley's final Springman release, Only Just Beginning, marked the complete transformation to the melancholic gypsy-influenced folk rock that persists in his music to this day. The album was heavily inspired by the time after the release of Counterpoint, in which Webley toured heavily in Russia. The songs were written primarily in an old hotel while he was feeling particularly melancholic, and the songs, while bright and instrumental aesthetic, have a certain amount of dreamy dreariness to them. It would be 4 years before Webley's next album release. As of the present day, The Cost of Living is the last full-length solo album in his discography consisting entirely of new songs. Strikingly darker in terms of its thematic content, Webley shifted even further towards the rock style for this 11-track album. The number 11 is a very significant number to Jason, almost bordering on an obsession, with numerous references appearing in his music and in his life in general, according to him. The Cost of Living was the first album that Webley released under his self-owned label 11 Records, and he would express his love for the number in one large way that will be mentioned later. This was not the only overarching thematic quirk in Jason's performances at this time. Aside from the obvious accordion, Webley had a notable obsession with tomatoes, and to a lesser extent vegetables in general. For a while, he drove a car that was made to resemble a tomato, and once even ate a whole tomato live on stage to begin his 11-11-11 show. Elements like these allow Webley to routinely captivate audiences. By the end of the show, every member of any crowd is fully engrossed in the experience, particularly at moments where Webley involves audiences in the performances with participatory activities such as singing, stomping, shaking noise bottles, and so on. In 2011, Webley started what he planned at the time to be a farewell tour, before going on an indefinite musical hiatus. A live album titled In This Light was released, an attempt at capturing the unique energy of a Jason Webley show in audio form. It included performances of songs from all across his discography, and even instances of audience participation, such as spinning around to induce a feeling of drunkenness for the song Drinking Song. The tour led up to one final show at the Moore Theater in Seattle on November 11th, 2011. The show was a celebration and bookending of his entire career up to that point, with appearances being made by artists he had done collaborative albums with, including Amanda Palmer and her husband Neil Gaiman, both of whom are close friends with Webley, and ending on a large orchestral performance of Last Song, after which he led his audience out into the streets for a walk to the beach while the backing band continued to play. The end of this show marked a 3-year hibernation. Webley would spend this time unsure of the future of his career, searching for a new muse. One thing that didn't hibernate, however, was Webley's fanbase. Traditionally, they are small in number, eclectic in nature, and highly devoted. Katie Hasty wrote an article for the underground artist section of Billboard in 2008, stating, "He was invited to tour in Mexico after a superfan dance choreographer created a ballet around his songs. He used that as an opportunity to meet Warner Latina pop star Jimena Sariñana, with whom he performed and penned some songs. Then there were some Russian college students who paid for his trip, and 7 subsequent others, to play shows in destinations like Siberia. Thousands of fans arrived at the shows knowing every word despite the language barrier. Playing to the fringe has worked in Webley's favor, enabling him to sell nearly 60,000 copies combined of his 5 full-length albums in a handful of collaborative efforts." At one point, a crowd of fans pushed Webley onto the top of the International Fountain at the Bumbershoot Festival in Seattle, leading to him being arrested. It got to the point where Webley was occasionally accused of running a literal cult, to which he responded by organizing Camp Tomato, a family-oriented event with various outdoor activities relating to tomatoes, which has been discontinued since 2011. Despite all this, the momentum around Webley managed to waver in the hiatus. However, on October 15th of 2012, Last Song was featured as the musical interlude on an episode of a popular fiction podcast called Welcome to Night Vale. This, along with other featured collaborations with the show, would inject a large number of younger fans into the mix, revitalizing the fanbase in the mid to late 2010s. Webley has remarked to Houston Press that the increase in fans that already have an interest in his music before ever even coming to a show has benefited him in performances. Quote, "When you're on the street, or in a bar, you have to fight to get people's attention. It's a lot riskier than when you're in a big theater. I used to enjoy that, but at a certain point, you don't want to have to go through that battle every time you perform. And I feel like there are a lot of places you can go with an audience if you have their attention from the beginning that aren't possible in less focused spaces. But I still admire those who keep putting themselves in risky situations." This is a prominent example of how, as with all independent artists, Webley's small but devoted fanbase has been critical to his success in both the past and the present. As of today, Webley has around 17,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, and his recorded performance of I Made a Promise to the Moon on a Welcome to Night Vale live show has over 320,000 views on YouTube. In the long periods between albums, Jason isn't always just laying low. Starting around 2007, he announced his intention to create 11 collaborative albums with other songwriters that he knows. These filled the time immediately before the release of Cost of Living, and up until the 2011 hiatus. Of these 11 planned projects, only 6 have been produced. 11 Saints, with Jay Thompson, an eclectic mix of songs that ranges from folk rock to surrealist pop. How Big is Tacoma, with folk musician Andrew Bemis, a sleepy and rustic collection of acoustic songs. 2 Bottles of Wine, with Reverend Peyton and his Big Damn Band, in which Webley and the Reverend indulge in raucous country rock and old-timey folk tunes. Elephant Elephant, the debut EP of fictional musical act Evelyn Evelyn, in which Webley teams up with popular Dresden Dolls member Amanda Palmer to portray conjoined musical twins doing dark cabaret. Days with You, with experimental Romani musician Skip Shirey, wherein Jason and Skip produce songs related to a common element in both their lives, constant travel, among other existential themes. Hockey Star. Together with his friends Caitlin Rippey and Oliver Orion, Webley formed the group Big Little Dipper Dipper to create an absurd parody of music from the early 90s, consisting of lyrics that he swears are not inside jokes, although they would easily be believed to be that. All of these collaborative works tend toward the silly and surreal, with the notable exceptions of 2 Bottles of Wine and Days with You. The act of co-writing with all these musicians would set a precedent for the two big collaborative albums that comprise the latter portion of his current discography.
So I was driving around in the middle of the night in San Francisco. No bones about it. I was looking for a dumpster to get rid of my garbage from my van.
So I took her to the cemetery, and up at the top of the hill there's this giant pyramid that just says Rucker across the top.
The bulk of Webley's work in the 2010s has been a very different paradigm. Since his 2011 hiatus, 2 albums have been released. The first, Margaret, is a collection of songs from various artists, including Webley himself, derived from an old scrapbook randomly found in a dumpster back in the 90s by Webley's friend Chicken John Rinaldi, a former member of the infamous Murder Junkies, for whom G.G. Allin was the frontman. The scrapbook's collection of photos, documents, letters, and poems chronicled the tragic life of Margaret Rucker, a woman who was born into a prominent family at the top of society in Everett, Washington, the city where Webley currently lives. During his hiatus, Webley was introduced to the scrapbook when he happened to tell Rinaldi of his hometown. Essentially, Margaret became Webley's muse, inspiring 2 songs, My Love Left Me in April and Pyramid. After this, Webley came up with the idea to recruit fellow musicians to come together and write more songs based on Margaret and her poems to perform in a show in Everett, which occurred in April of 2014. The songs were then recorded by popular demand and released on Margaret's birthday of December 12th that year. The success of Margaret led to Webley being asked by a local historical society to do a similar album about the Everett Massacre of 1916, a vicious gunfight at the docks between a boatload of members of the Industrial Workers of the World Union, also known as the Wobblies, and the Everett Police, where casualties occurred on both sides and no one really knows who fired the first shot. The album is more focused in topic than Margaret, dealing with the night of the massacre and the struggles of industrial workers that led up to it. In 100 Years Ago Tomorrow, care is taken on Webley's part to illustrate the perspectives of both sides, particularly in the title track. He and the contributors, an assortment of artists from around the area, managed to get it together just in time, performing a show of the songs on November 4th, the day before the anniversary of the massacre, hence the title. The songs were released in recorded form the following month. Finally, Webley's most recent project is a step farther off the beaten path. In 2017, he began plans for a project called Flotsam River Circus. Webley, along with a few other performers, musical or otherwise, would board a raft on Oregon's Willamette River and perform several free shows at stops along the way. Though delayed by 2 years due to some family issues, the show began July 19, 2019 at the Oregon Country Fair, and ended in Portland on August 4th. Since then, Webley has kept the same low profile that he traditionally adopts between periods of activity, making the occasional contribution to Welcome to Night Vale, including playing characters in their live shows, and the odd show in the Oregon-Washington area every now and then. It is unclear what exactly he plans to do next, but whatever it turns out to be, whether a new solo album, collaboration, or whatever else, his output both recent and past indicates that it will be unique at the very least.
I'm not from somewhere else and I am not a violent man. But if you're looking for trouble, then trouble you'll find. And 100 years ago tomorrow.
For about 21 years, Jason Webley has provided both fans and strangers with his unique style of musical entertainment, both in shows performed around the world and through the various outlets through which his recorded albums are delivered. Though he may vanish from the public on occasion, his fanbase persists in the magical cultural space most commonly known as the underground, perpetuating the artistic memory of that punky college student who hopped on a Greyhound bus with an accordion one day into the present where he is a respected musician whose work continues to captivate anyone who happens to give it a listen.
People sing to good